When we come back, we'll probably do the same.
The
Same
same
thing,
arrangement.
yeah.
Good.
Just
yes.
so you know, so
Yes.
it's not. And maybe I should shut the door of the. Now let me just tell a little bit more about the interview. So
Yes.
you look at me.
All
If
right.
you look in the camera, it's okay, but you know,
Yes.
I'm prettier
yes.
than the camera.
You are indeed, Sarah.
And what else? If you can, if you can repeat my question sometimes in your answer.
Sometimes, yes.
Yeah, that would
yes.
be good.
I
because
see.
we'll get rid of me. We'll just have you talking.
I see.
And if you
Fine.
don't, it's okay.
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. So.
But sometimes I will, sometimes I won't. Then. Yeah.
However you
Yes.
feel. I mean,
yes.
if you can try to.
Yeah, I'll try to
I think
just.
you're.
I'll try just to respond naturally to your question.
That would be good. So, where should we begin?
Well, as we're talking about the churches that were destroyed in World War II, maybe that's where we should begin. And so shall we start with my going to France?
Can we start earlier than that?
Sure, yes, wherever you wish.
Can we start at the beginning?
Well, my father had a phrase. He liked to say I was born in such and such a place. Well, he was born in Napa. Said, but as others have remarked, the place is famous for other reasons. And so I was born in Seattle, and in my parents' home, and had sort of the normal growing up. Is the camera running now? I see, yes. Well, normal sort of growing up with devoted parents, and happily I remember sharing the home with a sister who came along 2.5 years after I was born. She is now living in Seattle. Happily, she was married for many years, and she now has 4 children and almost too many grandchildren to count. I went to public schools, went to the University of Washington. I was always a little bit on the adventurous side of life, and almost too early, it was anxious to get away from home. I used to run away from home as a small child, and I remember I was quite determined about getting away. A neighbor saw me running away, and she tried to stop me and said, "Frederick, where are you going?" And to appease her, I said, "I'm going to Sunday school." And she said, "But Frederick, this is Tuesday." And I said, "Dear Mrs. Kinnear, I think you should go inside. You might catch cold." And so it went.
Why do you think that you were running away?
You know, I have no idea. It may be to escape what my mother was expecting me to do every day. That might be it. I have one memory of running away, and I heard my mother following after me. So I tried to run all the harder, but she caught me and brought me home. And I don't think, though, that I was always trying to escape my mother. She was wonderfully attentive, but maybe sometimes a little too attentive. it can be that parents will be that way. And so I remember early in 1924, my mother wanted to take out a life insurance policy with a company that was very well known in those days, the Metropolitan Life, and she was required to go to New York City and be examined by their physicians before they would issue it. So my father was very active in the politics of the state of Washington, and so she went as sort of an alternate delegate to the Democratic National Convention that was meeting in New York City that year, with the idea of choosing somebody to run for the presidency of the United States. And we went back there, and it was a wonderful experience for me. We were there for about 2 weeks. It was a famous convention because it was deadlocked between two candidates. One of them was named Franklin Roosevelt, and the other one was named, no, that's wrong. One of them was named Al Smith, and the other one was named William Gibbs McAdoo. He was the son-in-law of President Wilson, and the convention went on and on and on, and I went down to the convention on the day that Franklin Roosevelt nominated Al Smith for the presidency, and it was the only time I really have ever seen President Roosevelt. And at that time, he was Governor Roosevelt of New York State. The attendance at the convention dwindled because the delegates began to run out of money as it went on and on and on. But finally, neither of those two men were nominated. And a man named Davis, a name easy to forget because he never appeared particularly in the national scene, was nominated and roundly defeated by Calvin Coolidge. But it was a great event for me because I saw a great deal of theater in New York City at that time, including a spectacular production such as New York had never seen before, produced by Max Reinhardt, a very well-known Austrian producer. And it was a medieval play, and in which Lady Diana Duff Cooper played the part of the Virgin Mary. And she was esteemed as the most beautiful woman in the English-speaking world. And she was required by the script to stand in a niche for the Virgin. In the early part of the play, she had to stand motionless for a period of 1/2 hour.
Wow.
And years later, when I was in Venice, acting as chaplain to the little English-speaking community in the town, she came to be present at the at the baptism of a baby that I was conducting. And she came with her son, Lord Norwich, and I went up and spoke to her, and reminded her that in 1924 I had seen her on the New York stage. She was a woman as remarkable for her quick understanding of things as she was for her beauty. She immediately replied, "You must have been a babe in arms." And, later on, I had saved the program. This is a curious trait, that I saved the program and kept it for years and years and years. And then when I moved to San Francisco, I was back in Venice once and saw her son, and he said he would take the program with him back to his mother and have her sign it. And she did, and I have it today, and I consider it to be quite a treasure.
Okay. Can we go back to more about you and your childhood? Can I ask you some questions?
Sure.
It's
Certainly.
a great story that you just told about this woman. It sounds like such a nice keep meeting her over and over
Yes.
again. But let's go back to you. Let's talk
I
about.
could tell you a great deal more about her.
I'm sure you
and
can.
She would make a magnificent video.
Yeah.
Yes.
Maybe we should, and maybe that should be something else we'll do.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
But let's go back to you, and let me ask you a little bit more about what do you think when you were a child? What were the major influences on you and the way that you saw the world, or the way that you thought about things, or where did your, because I'd like to try to, you did something very special by collecting these shards of glass, and you've had a very interesting life. But I'm interested in, when you were a child, what were some of the experiences that stand out for you, that you feel shaped the man that you were to become? You know what I mean, right?
I suppose because I never liked schooling very much. I dutifully went off to school and had no trouble holding my place in classes and such. But I would say the thing that influenced me almost more than anything else were the old silent moving pictures. They introduced me to a world that was way, way, way beyond the one in which I lived, and I found it fascinating. And so every Saturday I would go to as many movies as I could, because it was the only day in the week that I could go to movies. And so I was well acquainted with all of the who the directors were and who the film stars were, and that interested me very much. I saw films very early. I think the earliest film I ever saw was Cinderella with Marguerite Clark. Marguerite Clark is forgotten today, but she was the major star of her time. And then the film that really seized me and gripped me, as no other film ever has to such an extent, was D.W. Griffith's film, The Birth of a Nation. Now, The Birth of a Nation, of course, is ideologically just a horrible film to watch. It is so racist, and yet for anyone my age, it's extremely embarrassing to watch today, because all America just felt the way that The Birth of a Nation was directing you to feel. It was a film championing the South, and it was aimed against every effort to improve the situation of the blacks. and and of course it was a great supporter of the Ku Klux Klan, so that it prejudiced me for many years. I felt that the South had been very badly treated after the end of the war, and felt that that the racism that it supported was just right for America. I did learn that that was altogether wrong, and have regretted it, of course, ever since. But it must be said that in terms of filmography, there never has been quite such a film as The Birth of a Nation. And I would recommend everybody to see it. The suspense at the end of the film was almost beyond endurance. Mm-hmm.
And so you're saying one of the things that had a huge impact on you as a child was seeing the world and seeing the world beyond where your small world in Seattle.
Yes, yes.
What else was, I mean, what else do you think was life transforming or life shaping for you when you were 7, when you were 10, when you were 15?
Mm-hmm.
Was there anything in your family? Was there a person in your life? Was there a priest in your life?
No. It's hard for me to think of anybody transforming. I suppose history. The one intellectual subject that appealed to me then was history, and we had a wonderful branch of the Seattle Public Library near my home and near my grammar school. I haunted its section on history, and they had a very good selection of books there. Bancroft's History of the United States, and also his history of the West Coast. And I read very widely amongst these sources, and histories remain for me an extremely it keeps you asking why, and there's hardly anything more intriguing than to be aware to ask the question why, and finding out what you can. So I would say that history was the next thing, and the movies used to illustrate history. I'm afraid I believed everything that I saw in the movies just the way you're supposed to believe everything that you saw in print in those days. And sometimes I was misinformed, but still it was a rewarding part of life. I remember after our dinners at home, we would all gather around the fireplace. My father would go to sleep rather quickly, and my grandmother was living with us, also did the same. But my mother, who was more active, she always had her eye on the situation. And but I would be seated in another chair somewhere with the book from the library on history. And I rather gladly remember those evenings at home.
So would you say that your parents instilled certain values in you about life, about morality, about your value, or did you feel that when you were a young man that I don't know, I'm trying to get a sense of what eventually got you to do the work that you did in your life?
Yes.
And was it just, I don't know, you know what
Yes.
it was like for you then?
No, I don't really think it was so much instruction from home with what was right and what was wrong. It was, I would say, just accepting what you found in the community of the sense of the way things should be. We lived in a nice part where our next to the next door neighbor was a councilman of the city of Seattle, and on the other side we had a man who had been the editor of a newspaper, and on the still other side there was a man who was the dramatic and musical critic for the Seattle Post-Intelligencer, and in back of us lived a man who had been a professional baseball player. So we had variety, and they were all people of ideas and with a good sense of what was right and wrong. And there was such a common pattern of understanding in this whole little nucleus where we were all living together of what was right and wrong, that you really never thought there could be any contest about it. I went to Sunday school, but Sunday school I did not find very attractive, and we had a nice minister whose sermons bored me to almost beyond belief. A good man, however, and so I never developed much interest in religion until, in fact, I sort of thought myself out of religion until I went away to France many years later and saw things in a different way. So I'm afraid that's the only way I can answer you that way. Mm-hmm.
That there wasn't some. So, what year were you born?
1908. Yes.
Which one is it? This one? Okay.
Yesterday, in watching the TV of the great service in our national cathedral, with President Bush attending, Billy Graham spoke during the course of the service, and at the end of it he said, "I'm an old man now. I'm 83 years of age." And I thought I could shout back to him, "Billy boy, you're speaking to a man who's 93 now." And now what were we talking about?
Well, you were saying when you were born, and then you were saying now
oh
you're
yes,
93.
yes.
So what was happening in the world when you were a teenager?
World War I.
So could you start it by saying when I was a teenager?
Just a minute. World War I was before I was a teenager, but it was like all wars. It absorbed everybody in the area. We young children fought that war day after day after day. We'd have a first choosing up of sides who had to be Germans, and the rest of us were happily not Germans, but ready to fight them. And that was an absorbing time. And the aftermath, of course. I suppose it had something to do with my early interest in the military. I would like to have gotten an appointment to West Point when I was in high school, and I applied. In the strange way that things happen, after I graduated, I entered the University of Washington and started out on a pre-med course. Only then, after I'd begun on this course, did I get notification that I had been accepted at West Point. But I turned it down because now I had thought I would rather be a doctor. But and I'm glad now too I turned it down. Now for Rory.
Okay, so let's just sort of get the facts. So you went to elementary school and then you went to high school.
Yes,
and
yes.
Can you just kind of talk us through that? What happened and what led you to becoming a father?
Yes, well...
maybe you can start sort of, I think you went a lot of different directions. And how are you feeling? Are you feeling tired or are you okay?
Oh, no, I'm all right.
Okay, good.
You.
You'll let us know.
Yes, surely.
Okay.
In terms of sequence, when I got back from the trip to New York, my father thought I was 16 years of age then. Was that right? 15 maybe. Anyway, my father thought it would be a good thing if I went to the Citizens Military Training Camp, which we had at Fort Lewis, about 30 miles away from Seattle. So with another friend, we went out and were accepted for the month-long training course. And I found it very interesting. So much so that when we got back, I joined the Washington National Guard. I must have been 16 at that time, and I was illegally a member of the Guard because you were supposed to be 18 before you could get into it. So the military was a part of my life, and then I went to the University of Washington, where once again I wasn't much taken with my studies. I joined a national fraternity, which I didn't particularly enjoy. And indeed, it was the summer before I went to the university, I decided I wanted to do something adventurous, really adventurous. And I went down to apply for a job on an ocean-going ship on top deck. But no such position opened up, but there was one that opened up down in what is called the black gang. That means the people who work below the decks in the engine rooms. And so I became a wiper on the SS President Jefferson, which traveled from Seattle to the Far East and then back to Seattle, taking about 7 weeks for the course of a voyage. This was an exciting and difficult part of my life compared to what I'd known previously, and I welcome it as a very valuable experience for me. I was glad to get back home again, however.
When you said you were 16 and you went to a military training camp?
Yes.
And how did you feel about being in the military, being in the army? Did you feel very patriotic? Did you think
Not particularly.